Okay, good morning. This is the Temple Development Hub take two, because I seem to have a technical difficulty for a second there. I don't know if you could hear Bhavna, but I couldn't. But anyway, we're back. It's Thursday, it's the Hub, and I'm joined by the fabulous Bhavna Gupta to talk about the story behind stories. I've introduced Bhavna in the blurb as one of my favorite marigolds. So just before we start, this is a term that I learned from Bhavna. Bhavna, what is a marigold?
So, Teresa, the hub is a marigold for me. It's a garden of marigolds for me. So, marigold, basically, the concept of marigolds comes from the concept called companion plants. And the marigold plant is supposed to be a very good companion plant because anything that's planted next to a marigold plant flourishes very well. Any plant planted next to it. So for that reason, I call my colleagues marigolds because I flourish when I'm with them, and hopefully I'm able to help them flourish. So the concept of marigolds, it's called the marigold effect, which I learned during COVID, and I really love the concept. So that's why I refer to all my colleagues as my marigolds. And the hub has been one of my major learning locations. So yes, I'm happy to be here. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me here, Teresa.
Well, I mean, we're so excited to have you as well, because you've been one of the kind of the hub supporters from the very beginning, and you've been so involved in your own projects as well. And so that's what we're kind of here to chat about today, the Learning Sutra and Storyland. We were chatting a little bit before we started this live, talking about one of Bhavna's most recent Storyland videos, which is about a story called Stage Fright. And we chatted a little bit about how, you know, even after years of being online and years of delivering webinars and things online, we still get stage fright. And as you see, there are still technical glitches that come along to surprise us. So anyway, I'm really excited to hear about Bhavna's story behind the stories. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over.
Thank you so much, Teresa. So I'm going to share what helped me come to this or start this journey and how I'm where I am right now. It's been a learning journey for me as well. And a little disclaimer at the beginning, this presentation has been put together in too much of a hurry today. We were going to go without a presentation. So in case there's any typo, please forgive me right at the beginning. So with that, let's begin. First, I want you to look at this image that you see on your right. And if you could tell me some words that come to your mind when you see this image. And T can tell me if there's anything in the chat.
Yes, and this was something I was meant to mention in my introduction, that last week I was having problems viewing the chat, the comments that were popping up in Facebook. So if you are commenting, we will see them at some point, and my apologies if I don't see them right now. So for me, I guess, the minute that you showed this photo, Bhavna, I just thought that she looked so peaceful, and just in the moment, like she's got her eyes closed. She's just enjoying the world around her, but also her own thoughts, I think.
Exactly. And that's what I want my stories to be. It has to be in the moment. It has to be learners watching or listening to a story, but at the same time, it has to be reflective as well, which is what I try to bring in through the stories. So basically, it's the process of listening and watching the story, listening to and watching the story, but at the same time, thinking about it a lot deeper than what the story tells you. So it's a little beyond the comprehension of the story. Okay. So before we start, I'll also like to tell you a little bit about my context, because that is what informs how I go ahead with my projects. So I'm based in India, in Mumbai. And when I started my storytelling journey, it was a face-to-face journey. I visited certain schools, which were mostly from the marginalized sector, but a mix of other schools as well. And I started narrating these stories live during the month of September last year. The context here in India, when it comes to language learning or ELT, is this. We can't boast about too many language schools here. So it's mostly language or English that's learned in schools, or the English that you want to learn later as adults is when you want to prepare for an exam like TOEFL or IELTS or something like that. So basically, it's more from the employability perspective than from learning of language. So there are no basic language schools. The classes that you go to, classrooms, are large classes with student strengths of more than minimum 50, I would say, sometimes as much as 70. So that's the kind of student strength that we have. Learners come from multilingual backgrounds. They speak a variety of languages. So to bring all that together is, again, a challenge. Some schools have very basic infrastructure, especially the marginalized ones that I'm talking about. Sometimes even no benches in schools like that. I've been to schools like that as well. There's a strong emphasis on grammar, learning of grammar. So learning of English is equated with the learning of grammar. And there's always an eternal debate between the importance of language versus STEM. So keeping in mind all this context, when I wanted to move ahead with my vision of teaching language and life lessons, the one thing was very clear for me, that language itself could not be a selling point here. I had to, in certain ways, window dress the language learning and the life learning bit of it. So which is why this process slowly evolved into a storytelling process, which is what it is now. Now, in today's presentation, basically, I'll be talking about these four areas. We'll be going through these four areas. Like I say, I teach language and life lessons through stories. So basically, those are two of my areas, language lessons and life lessons. I'll be telling you how I do that. I'll be taking you through a little recording of one of my stories, the most recent one, little glimpses of that story so that you can see how I bring in those elements. At the end, I'll also be talking about a little framework that I've developed for myself before I plan for the stories, which is what helps me to bring in different elements into the story. And finally, I think we'll also have a Q&A, right, Teresa? We'll have time for some Q&A if there are any. And also during the presentation, I'm going to be stressing mostly on the materials writing or the academic bit of the story planning. But if there are any logistic-based questions like recording of the story, editing of the videos, I can try my best to answer those as much as I know, because I'm not an expert there, but I can still help you with whatever experience I've gained through this journey. So let's start with that then. The first aspect is my language lessons. So obviously, since I am an ELT consultant or ELT teacher, I would say that was one of my primary goals, to teach them certain language structures through the story, which is also what we did in traditional storytelling. Traditional storytelling was all about learning language. In fact, even our mother language or the home language is something we picked up probably through the stories narrated to us by our elders. So that was one prime aspect that I wanted to cover. Now, coming to language lessons, if I talk about language lessons, again, going back to my context in India, I started by creating materials which were more intensive in terms of language. However, as I realized, that would not work in my context, because there is no market for a lesson like that in this context, or very limited market, I would say. So that's when I decided that I would have to change directions and give the materials a twist, which would sort of make them more relevant to my context. So through the website, I started designing material for young learners, which was a little more simpler than what it was earlier. Now, I'll be showing you a little glimpse of the lesson. So this is my website, which is learningsutra.com. This is just a screenshot from there. So basically, my tagline there was that we don't teach English, but we help you use whatever English you know. So that was what I started with. And these two screenshots that you see are page 1 and page 2 of my lesson on stage fright, the latest story that I've released. So this is something that I put up on my website. So once I record the story, or even before I record the story sometimes, I create this little lesson, mostly a 2-pager lesson, which has some elements of vocabulary in it, some elements of language learning, and some elements of life. So basically questions that I ask them to make them think and reflect upon the topic that I want to. So this aspect of my storytelling, or this aspect of the lessons, is on my website, the worksheet itself. It's not connected to YouTube directly, but then this is something which adds on to that story. So this is one aspect of my stories. The second aspect, which is what is more important for me and which is what I choose to focus on, is the life lessons that I want to teach through the stories. Now, this aspect is something that I incorporate while I'm recording the story. And even before I record, I plan about what I want to integrate into the story. So whenever somebody watches, whether it's a learner, whether it's a parent or a teacher, or parents and children watching the story together, I want these life lessons to be going to everybody. The language lesson is optional. If you want to learn language, you can still get the worksheet. But this is something that I want them to learn, and it's something which I will not compromise on. So that comes in through my story, through the planning process in the story. And this is how I do it. So in the life lessons, or within the narration of the story, I start with something which I refer to as before watching, and I call it think to learn. So if there's a story on a relevant topic, I first give them questions to think about, and I remind them to pause the story if they want to, so that they can make some notes about these questions. Even at the beginning of the story, I give them this reminder that you can pause the story as many times as you wish and come back to where you were and then resume your story. So basically, if you look here, you will see this lesson was about stage fright. So the questions here are related to stage fright. What was the last time you felt nervous? What is it that made you feel nervous? How would your body respond to that? So these questions automatically become my before watching questions and take the audience into that zone where I want to lead them. So this is the first part of my story, think to learn, and they start, it's something like a lead-in or a before watch activity. Then I narrate the story, and again, I ask them questions even within the story at different stages, where I focus on emotional aspects of the story, sometimes climatic aspects of the story. Sometimes I focus on cultural differences within different countries, what is similar, not the differences really, so what is similar to your culture. So I want to bring in that there are certain elements which bring us together. And that's what I ask during the story. And I give bits of did you know kind of pop-ups where they can find out a little more about Indian culture as well. Towards the end of the story, again, I put in this element which has come recently. It was not there in my first story, but like I said, it's an evolving process. So it's coming up slowly. This is what my desired learning outcome is. This is what I want them to go away with. Whether they learn language or not, whether they understand the story or not, I want them to learn these points. So I call it read to remember. So in this story, it was more about stage fright. So I've spoken about stage fright here, told them about how stage fright is an essential component. And I've confessed that I have stage fright too. At the beginning of any session. So it's for them to understand that this is something very, very usual, not something to be scared of. So these points help them understand that stage fright is a part of the journey, and they learn to manage it a little better, hopefully. So this is my desired learning outcome, or the life lesson, as I call it. The last bit of it is what I call after watching, which I leave them with, which are questions where they can pause and ponder. So even after the story ends, I want them to keep thinking about the story, which is when I take them outside into the real world and ask them questions which will help them to continue this journey of learning. So every time probably they face an experience where they will have stage fright, they will probably think of the story and think of some tips where they can manage stage fright in a better way. And in no way does it tell them that if you've had stage fright once and if you overcome it, you will not face it again. They may face it again, but they know how to manage it a little better. So basically, these questions help them think and take the questions or the story beyond the classroom and let it be with them to reflect upon. Now, this is one part of my life lessons, which is covered in the narration of the story, in the story, the video of the story. But very recently, I have discovered another way of sharing life lessons, which is by making shorts on my YouTube channel. Now, I honestly confess that I do have stage fright when I when I narrate the stories or recite something in front of an audience. So I had a lot of hesitation about going live and shooting these 1 minute shots. I was very, very, very apprehensive about doing these. But slowly I thought, if I'm telling young learners to do that, why shouldn't I be learning through the process as well? Which is when I created my first short, which was about stage fright. And it was just before the story on stage fright was about to be published. So that was my first. But what started as something for me to grow over my stage fear soon became another angle to my life lessons. So earlier, I was also told that when you make shorts, it's a very good way to get subscribers to your channel and to keep subscribers engaged till you come out with your next story, because the long form content it takes time. So it started like that. But soon I began to enjoy it, and I took this as another opportunity to talk about topics which are related to the stories. So right now, what I do is that I create a series of shorts on topics which are related to the story, so that I have an opportunity to explicitly focus on the same life lessons that I'm talking about in the story. So if it's in the story, if it's a little let's say it's gelled into the story and it's integrated, very implicitly woven into the story. Here it's more explicit, where I'm talking about stage fright, comfort zone. So the first series was about stage fright, comfort zone, how you move on to the learning zone and things like that. And the next series, which is also already there, is about beauty, which is also connected to another story on my YouTube channel, Beauty Goes Missing. So again, there it's to create this change in the conventional and the stereotypical idea of beauty, and helping them understand that beauty goes much beyond looks. So then this evolved into a process which became an explicit focus on the same topic. So right now it's me creating these shorts in a couple of series. So for every topic that I decide, I create a series, for example, at least 3 or 4 shorts on that same topic, linking one topic to the other. And also another series of shorts, which is just for fun. So there's another playlist, which is called Let's Have Fun, which is something that I share when I go around on my vacation. I take little videos there and share it with my learners and help them to see what my life is also. So that's on the lighter side. But of course, my playlist Life Lessons is the one that I really, really want to develop as I go along this. So this basically is the second aspect, which is on the YouTube bit of it. Now going to the third aspect of it, which is my real stories. So how do I narrate these stories? As teachers, we are always told that when you say something to your learners, always give them an example. So for that, I'm going to give you an example, a little example of a story from the most recent one from my YouTube channel, which, like I said, is called Stage Fright. So again, so Teresa, I'm going to play little bits of this story. Let me know if you can hear. Okay, 1 minute. Let me just check about the sound first. I believe I haven't shared that. Okay, share sound. Okay. So I'm going to be playing. Can you see the video?
At the moment, it's a black screen.
Okay. So then I'm going to stop one of that because there's something which came up on my screen also. Can you see it now? The screen again?
I can see, yep, your slide with the stage fright with the thumbnail of the video, yeah.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next one. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this. Tell me if you can hear it. Just take it a little further. Okay, so
Namaste. I'm Bhavna, the founder of Learning Sutra, Lifelong Learning.
So can I just skim through this video? Let me see if I can just take it a little further.
I'm an English language trainer and, of course, a storyteller. And you can call me Story Auntie.
Somehow it's not moving. Can I skip?
Do you like listening to stories?
Just a minute.
If so, welcome to my channel, Story.
No, I'm not able to move it further for some reason.
By Learning
Please.
Sutra.
So just give me a minute. I'll stop sharing and I'll share it from the YouTube channel. I've kept it open there.
No problem. Whilst you're setting that up, we've had a lovely comment from Nina, who said, I think many of us become interested in life coaching because we end up talking about a lot of personal things with our students. And working with storytelling is also very natural for us language teachers because we often listen to our students' stories. Stories are important. And she said she's loving the presentation and so inspired by your work.
Thank you so much. So let me see if I can share the screen. This should be better. Are you able to hear this?
Namaste.
So I'm going to take it a little further. I will not show you the whole thing, but we can have
The learningsutra.com for language lessons based on the stories. So let's get started. The name of the story, Stage Fright. The author of the story, the one who's written the story, is Yamini Vijayan. The illustrator, the one who's drawn the pictures in the story, is Somesh Kumar. And the story is published by Pratham Books. So thank you everyone for bringing us the story.
So this is the first point that I started with. I wanted to be very sure that we highlight the name of the author and the name of the illustrator as well. Sometimes the illustrator goes unnoticed. So it's important to bring out that, which is what I start every story with, and thanking them. And also it helps me because it's a copyright-free site, by the way. The site where I take the stories from is a CC BY 4.0 license. So they allow you to use the story as in any way that you want to. But at the same time, I would still like to thank them because the hard work has been done by them, which is the starting point for my story. So that's the first thing that I go with. The next that I come to is these questions.
Before we start the story, as usual, let's think to learn. Pause the video here and think about the answers to these questions. When was the last time you felt nervous?
So this is the beginning of my narration. I read out those questions. I give them signals to stop, to pause the story, think about those questions. Even if they don't take notes really, at least they've started thinking about that process, which is what is important for me. So that's my think to learn. That's how I bring in that element, the before watch element. Now, in between, I'm going to stop the story.
What made you feel nervous?
So if you look at this.
You like singing?
Are you able to see my screen? What's your hobby? So in between, wherever there is opportunity for me to bring out connection to real life, to their lives, I bring out those connections. So when she's talking about hobby, I make sure I talk to them about their hobby, what they love doing. And at certain points, make them feel that everything that they do is also important, not just from the character point of view, but it's connected to their real life. In fact, in the next story that is not on my YouTube channel next, it's not there yet. There was a question which came up and it talked about a character being very, very clever at school. But not everyone is clever and not everybody stands first in school. So I was thinking about what to do. And that's when I brought in this element saying, okay, so what are you good at? Are you good at helping others? Are you good at taking care of your sibling? Are you good at helping your parents? So if that's the case, that is also something that you should be proud of. So it's a skill that you own. Sometimes we don't look at that. So basically from drawing, painting, standing first in class, that could also be something that you need to be proud of. So in that way, I bring out these different elements and make them think about how all these stories are connected to their life also and how they can form a connect to the character. So this is about hobby. Again, moving forward
to your hobby?
Stages.
Do you feel happy or sad? And
how do you feel when you're doing something? Do you feel nice? What makes you feel nice? So these questions keep coming up. I talk through them and I then also put them on the screen for them to read.
why? Do your family members and friends know what you love doing?
Again, moving on.
Almost fainted?
So what happens? Champa almost fainted at a certain time when she was singing. So have you felt nervous? Have you ever felt that way? What did you do? Who helped you? Who did you speak to? So these questions come in at different stages of the story.
What did you do when you felt like that? Did you share your feelings with someone? What do you think Champa should do? Sharing your feelings with someone you trust helps you to calm down. So do you think Champa will share her feelings and fears with Basant?
Okay, now another interesting thing in this story, which I would also like to highlight is, give me a minute and I'll come to that page. So this page is about Champa having a rehearsal, singing rehearsal before the main event. Now here, if you see, there were a lot of animals and she's rehearsing with these animals. Now here again, I found an opportunity to talk about how there's one way that you could overcome your stage fright by practicing with your pet or with a plushie or with a little baby that's maybe a sibling. So when you speak to someone, it's more about you speaking and letting go of that fear. So psychologically, I also found out, this was something I researched again, that when you practice a speech with a dog, it helps you overcome your fear of speaking publicly. So again, that's something that I highlighted here, but not everybody has a dog. So maybe they can practice with a soft toy or with their sibling, with a little baby in the house or anything for that matter. So this is, again, another opportunity I found for helping them with overcoming stage fright. So just like this, I bring in these little tidbits. Then there is this little bit where the grandfather knits a sweater for Champa, who's the protagonist of the story. And here I found an opportunity to bring in gender roles about grandfather weaving a sweater, which is so lovely. So again, I spoke about that and highlighted that here. So it's more like a very subtle reminder of things. It's not in your face, but at the same time, I don't miss these opportunities to bring out these aspects. So just like that,
She's wearing the sweater that her grandfather knit, especially for the show. Isn't it lovely that she has a special sweater? And isn't it lovely that her grandfather made it for her? Do you have something special that a family member or a friend gifted you? What is it? How do you feel when you use it? Tell me in the comments.
So again, these questions make them think. Of course, I don't know how many comments will come in, but I do want them to think about it. So moving on like this, I bring in these tidbits, put in these questions and sort of work on the whole layout of the story. The text itself is something that I've changed through Canva. So earlier in the story, it's not something that can be easily, it's not really visible on the screen. So then I had to highlight the background of the text and things like that, little things like that. And of course, the planning bit. And at the end again, when I come to the end of the story, that's when I leave them with these questions.
Learn from the story. Let's read to remember. Stage fright is all.
So again, I leave them with these reminders, and the last part is
Also
where I ask them to
out the playlists on my YouTube channel. My story. Let me leave.
So the last part where I prompt them to keep thinking about the story and how it applies to their real life. Another story in my earlier story, there's a story called My Brother's Wheelchair, which is where I left them with a question about real life and looking through their neighborhood and seeing if there are any ramps around and whether they can find those ramps. And at that point, I think another group of mine, another important group, Reflecting Reality, where Lottie is a DEI expert. She helped me a lot with those questions and how to frame them correctly so as not to exclude anyone. So that's something that I want to come through strongly from the story. So I'm going to stop sharing this now. And I'll go back to my presentation. Just give me a minute.
Just whilst you're setting it up, I mean, you mentioned not really kind of the logistics and the kind of technical side of things, but the design of your videos is really striking. I think how you have the story really clear with the text, and then yourself up in the little window in the corner, and then you add little graphics and the questions on the side. It's really well thought out as
it was a process, Teresa. If you watch my first story, it wasn't as smooth. Trust me, like I said, it's still a learning journey for me. So it's been evolving as I'm learning. In my first video, I didn't even know how to edit a video. So it was recorded in one stroke, and which is why I was so nervous. But as I learned, I could then splice the video, and it added to my confidence as well. So that was something that helped me again. Going back to my story, just a minute. Okay, let's move on to the, yeah. Can you see my screen? Okay. So basically, this is how I plan for the story. It's a long process. Like I said, first picking out a story which suits the points that I want them to learn. There is a very long, a vast variety of stories to choose from on that platform, but still I prefer to choose stories which sort of resonate with me and the ideas that I want to really teach them through the story. Now, what I want them, what I use for my planning is this. It's something which I call the 3S framework. I'm not going to go into this too much in detail, but anybody who wants to have a look at it, it's already there on my website. In my conference presentations, if you go to the bottom, I have a handout for this if anybody wants to download it. So basically, in a nutshell, what this says is this is a 3S framework, which talks about apparently 3 S's. The first S being the 4 skills of language. That's listening, reading, speaking, and writing. The second S talks about the systems of language, which is grammar, discourse, vocabulary, and pronunciation, if I'm not wrong. Phonology, basically. So that's the second S for me. But the third and the most important S for me becomes society. And this is what I use as an opportunity to connect my story into the outside world. And into the society circle, I fit in all these elements that I spoke about, anything related to culture, any information that I want to give them, anything about gender roles, anything about climate, anything about diversity. So all of that social emotional learning, all that goes into my third circle, which I call the society circle. And it's an evolving circle. Like you can see this diagram here, I call it my evolving circle. So unlike the outer circle, that's inner and the outer circle, which has 4 skills and 4 systems and cannot be changed as of now, of course, evolving circle is something which is more flexible for me. Whatever I can bring in through that story, whatever points lend itself to that story, I bring in that through the third circle of my story. Now, when I started creating the circle in my mind, I soon came up with this framework, which helped me align my story to these different elements. And then I also came up with a little checklist, which I use before I plan the story. So once I've chosen the story, the first thing is that I go through the story and look out for opportunities to bring in the society circle elements into the story. So what is it that I can bring in through the story? Can I teach them something about culture? Can I teach them something about climate through the story? Can I talk about social and emotional learning? Can I talk about emotional management? Whatever. So that's something that comes. Can I talk about SDGs from the story? I haven't done that yet explicitly, but yeah, it's sort of integrated into the story. So I use this framework and the checklist in sort of integration with each other to plan my story, just to make a few notes and move through the narration in a more structured manner rather than just a random haphazard manner. So the planning of the story itself takes a long time. The narration doesn't take as long, but the planning takes quite a long time for the story. Now, what this what inspired this framework for me is what I would sort of like to end the presentation with. So there are these two inspirations that I got. One is from a quote which Nick Peachy has shared, which says that a good language lesson, from a good language lesson, a student should learn three things. One, something about the language. Second, something about the world. And third, something about themselves. So this was something which coincidentally came up while I was in the process, and it caught my fancy. And this is what I want to teach my learners. So basically, I align my framework to this in a way. And the second thing that really inspired me is this poem. I know you cannot read this. I could share links in the chat box later for this poem, which is quite a common one and a very popular one by Alan Malley, which is about being a teacher. So a teacher, what do you teach? So I teach English, but what in English? Is it grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary? Yes, all that, but more than that too. What's that more aspect of it? It's about the world. It's about inflation. It's about the SDGs. It's about poverty. It's about economic inequality. It could be anything. So this is another poem which strikes a very strong chord with me, and I'm inspired by these two. And hopefully the stories that I narrate, I'm able to align the stories in a way that I'm able to do justice to these two quotes by these stalwarts of ELT. That's my vision, and that's the mission that I've started Learning Sutra with. So on that note, that's the end of my presentation. And that's what I do when I create language and life lessons through the stories. But I would also like to add that it's this entire framework, the 3S framework, did not start with stories really. It started with application to any lesson. So trust me, you pick up any lesson from a course book. I'm talking about the Indian context right now. So state board textbooks and the educators that I worked with, we tried to pick out lessons from their books, the lessons that they actually teach in the classroom. And we tried to apply this framework. In an internal workshop, we did this with my colleague. So we found out that it's easy to have some sort of a checklist to guide you so that you can integrate these elements. So it works not just with stories, but with any English lesson. For me, I'm applying it right now more to stories. So that's the end of my presentation for now. And if there are any questions, these are my contact details. Anybody who wants to get in touch with me, this colorful QR code is something. I love colors, especially the colors that I use in my brand, pink and blue. So I customized this in the colors of Learning Sutra, and I love the look that it gave me. So I stuck onto this, though it's a little fancy, yes, but yeah, it's a QR code that I love. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can watch my story channel. I would request teachers, all ELT professionals, to treat the stories from an ELT perspective, not just from the story perspective, and see how they work with the worksheets. And as always, if there's something that can be made better, if there's some other element that you would like included, I'm open to feedback. Please share that to me, and we can work further based, keeping that feedback in mind. So thank you so much.
That was such an awesome session, Bhavna. Thank you so much for sharing the process that goes into your Storyland venture. Thinking about the stories, you mentioned that you focus quite carefully on the life lessons that you can bring out of the stories. What other aspects would you like to tackle in your stories in the future?
Right now, I've thought about some SDGs, which I want to probably look for some lessons which are related to climate, which could bring out the climate aspect of it. There is, I think, a lot of it is mostly around diversity, because I'm very, very passionate about gender roles. So there are different stories related to that. The next story that's coming up is related to kindness to animals. So again, that's another aspect that will come out from the next story. Could take a little time. It's, like I say, in production right now. So that's one aspect. And then a lot of stories in the future could also be based on STEM subjects. So where we see girls taking on active roles in the STEM field, STEM area. to inspire and to break that stereotype of STEM being more for boys rather than girls. So that's another, again, it's more from the cultural angle, from the cultural context that I come in, but that's something that I would definitely like to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, like I discussed earlier, my entire learning sutra has been a journey. The first workshop that I conducted for children was a workshop on menstruation. So probably I want to go back to that also at a later stage and combine that with some elements of language learning. And I've already done that for another research study, which is Gendering ELT, which is a research study going on right now. And I had created a lesson based on the topic of menstruation, an ELT lesson based on menstruation, which has been selected for publication also. And when that publication is released, it will be there. So hopefully these are some topics which I want to visualize through my stories.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Fabulous, excellent. I mean, you talk as well about the process of creating your stories. How long does it take you to kind of think about the questions that you're going to ask? All of the questions that you ask during the video, they're very carefully considered. So what's your process of kind of creating? So
that is what takes the largest chunk of time. So which is why I'm not able to put out more than one story per month. That's an average that I've been at right now. So basically, like I said, it starts with first selecting a story closest to the point that I want to teach them. Fortunately, like I said, there's a vast bank of stories to choose from, but I have to still sort of come up with something that resonates more with me. So once I've chosen that, the first step I do is work on Canva. So that platform where I get the stories from, it's called Pratham Story Weavers, by the way. It's an Indian platform. So they have PDFs of these books available, which you can freely download. So the first step is to download that PDF and upload the PDF onto Canva. When I upload it to Canva, it gives me, so that format, that the PDF format allows me to break up that PDF into images and text separately. So I can remove the text if I want, or remove the images. So if you look at my first story, there were 2 pages for every page of the story, one without the text and the second without text. But that proved to be very time consuming in terms of narrating the story. So to keep that time a little shorter, I went with one version of that story. So once I do that, the text, like I said, is not very visible on the screen. So first I need to go through that entire PDF and change the text, highlight it in a darker background and things like that. That's the first step that I do, which doesn't require, it's a no-brainer, but it still takes a lot of time to look at the placement of the text, because when the font size is also increased, so the sentence breaks in a different way. I have to read all of that and put it in the right format so that it reads properly. The next step is what you talked about, the questions. So then I go through every page of the text, and keeping my framework in mind, keeping that checklist in mind, I try to make this sort of bullet point notes on that checklist, a printout, or maybe even on a soft copy. So looking at those points, I try to write down what I can bring in through each page of the story. How can I connect it to their real life? And trust me, it takes a very, very long time. First to think of those questions, and then to bring out those questions in the narration, plus put a little chunk of that question on the screen for them to visually read it also. So all that is a process itself. And that's, like I said, the longest process. Once all that is done, then I actually come to the recording of the story. Then I start thinking about the recording, not even actually recording, because it's very tiring. Actually, I find it very tiring to record one whole story. It sort of tires me out, so that for a while, I don't want to look at the screen. It's that intensive for me, at least. So then once all that is ready, I've made notes on Canva and have my brief framework ready. Then I start recording the story. I record it on Zoom in a raw version. And again, that recording, once Zoom processes that recording, I save it on my local device. And then I upload that recording onto Canva. And that's where I start editing the video. In fact, for that also, I used another software earlier. There's a free software called Clipchamp, which is a Microsoft software. I didn't know it was on my laptop. I just typed video editor and it popped up. So I started using that. So my first few stories were edited on that software. But there were certain limitations in that. If you look at, I think, this story or my brother's wheelchair, the third story, I think, there is text in that story, but that text remains for a very short time. It's there just for 5 seconds. So it's not enough to have that kind of an impact. It goes away very quickly, which is some feedback that I received from parents also. And I was also in touch with Emma at that time, who watched the story and told me it goes away very quickly. I said, yeah, I'm trying to find out something for that, a solution for that, which is when then I shifted to Canva. Now for Canva, what I need to do is every time I need to change the text on the screen. At that point, I need to cut that story, splice the video into the next portion, and then change the text and move to the next portion. So it's absolutely a very, very time-consuming process. But what I would say is when I worked on Clipchamp, it was a little smoother than Canva in terms of giving me more precision over the timing. But because I had learned that, it was easier for me to learn video editing on Canva. It's a little clumsy on Canva, but I've got around because I have the hang of Clipchamp now. So now I'm doing it on Canva. The last story, the stage fright story, was on Canva, which is why the text is so prominent and it stays for as long as I want it to be there on the screen. And then I can put in these little stickers about commenting and subscribing and life lessons and things like that. So it gives me more control over the graphics in that story. And fortunately, when I'm recording on Zoom, if you have seen, just below my box, there's that block, just before my, below my thumbnail, there's that blank box. And that is a space I decided to use for anything that I wanted to highlight. So that space is dead space for me, but I made it a little more constructive and put in those elements there. So that is what makes that entire experience more meaningful and more rich for the viewers also. So they can watch, they can listen, they can stop and reflect and things like that.
That's so cool. It's really interesting.
A long process.
No, it's really interesting to hear about it. And like I said before, you know, you mentioned the black box on the side. I kind of thought that was something that you'd done specifically, but yeah, it's from the Zoom recording.
It's a Zoom thing. So when you're recording on Zoom, the recording comes up like that. Mm-hmm. So that turned into an opportunity for me to highlight whatever I wanted to.
Yep, absolutely. It's a great space to put all your questions. Fabulous. We haven't had any other questions come in. Going back to what you were saying before, Nina said yes to awareness about menstruation. She's done that in her courses for adult women, and it's always a popular topic. And we've mentioned before in the hub about how it's not a topic which is often included, ever included in course books. So definitely something for us to work.
Hopefully there'll be more with studies like gendering ELT. There could be more focus on topics like this also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you very much, Bhavna, for joining us this morning. If anybody has any more comments, if you have any questions for Bhavna, do feel free to pop them in the chat. As I said before, Bhavna is a hub favorite. She's been here pretty much since the beginning. She's very active in the group, so I'm sure she'll keep an eye out and answer any questions that you might have. I've shared the link to the Learning Sutra and to the Storyland channel. But you've got Bhavna's details on the board as well now, if you want to
reach out to me on LinkedIn too.
Mm-hmm.
Quite active there, not too much on Facebook lately, except for the groups, of course. Yeah. But personal profile, not much.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Cool. Well, everyone, have a fabulous week. We'll be back next week with a coffee break, I think. I'm getting very confused by what's happening every Thursday. We've had lots and lots of fabulous webinars, and we should probably have a coffee break again soon. Okie dokie. Thanks again to Bhavna. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.